March 8, 1931. Al Capone was outnumbered 12-1. Dutch Schultz had sent his deadliest crew to Chicago. Salvatore the Blade Romano, Eddie Ice Cold Murphy, Vincent Silent Torres, and 9 more killers whose reputations made hardened criminals cross the street. They cornered Al in the Biograph Theater after hours. No witnesses, no way out. Dutch was New York's most ruthless crime boss. Al was still building his Chicago empire. Everyone expected the same ending: Al Capone dead in a movie theater. But what Dutch didn't know was that Al Capone never played by anyone else's rules. 2 hours later, only one of those 12 men walked out alive, carrying a message that made Dutch Schultz, a man who'd personally executed over 30 rivals, lock himself in his fortress for a week. This is the story of how Al Capone became the undisputed king of American organized crime. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand Chicago in 1931. Prohibition was still the law, but everyone knew it was dying. Smart criminals were diversifying: gambling, protection, legitimate businesses. Al Capone had vision. While other bosses fought over bootlegging territory, Al was building an empire that could survive any law change. But Dutch Schultz saw Chicago differently. He saw Al's success and wanted to take it. Dutch controlled New York's numbers racket, pulled in millions monthly, but he was greedy. Chicago's gambling and protection money looked too good to ignore. There was just one problem standing between Dutch and that fortune: Alphonse Capone. Al wasn't just muscle, he was a strategist who'd read Sun Tzu in prison, who understood that real power came from controlling information, not just territory. When local politicians tried to squeeze him, Al bought the judges above them. When rivals threatened his operations, Al eliminated the problem before it became a war. He was patient, calculating, and he'd never lost a strategic confrontation. February 1931, Dutch sent negotiators to Chicago. They met Al at the Green Mill, his favorite jazz club on the north side. The message was simple: partner with Dutch, split Chicago 50-50, or get buried. Al listened politely, ordered them drinks, even complimented Dutch's business sense. Then he smiled that calm smile that made experienced criminals nervous. "Tell Dutch Schultz," Al said, stubbing out his cigar, "that Chicago isn't for sale. Tell him that if he wants something from my city, he needs to earn it the hard way." The negotiators returned to New York with Al's response. Dutch Schultz, who'd never been denied anything he wanted, who'd built his empire on the fear that his name inspired, made a decision that would define both their legacies. If Al Capone wouldn't bend, he would break. March 5, 1931. 3 days before the theater confrontation, Dutch assembled his deadliest team in a Bronx warehouse. 12 men, each a specialist. Salvatore Romano had killed 19 people with a knife, preferred close work. Eddie Murphy was a sniper who could put a bullet through a dime from 200 yards. Vincent Torres strangled victims with piano wire, never made a sound. Capone thinks Chicago makes him untouchable, Dutch told his assembled killers. We're going to prove him wrong. Public hit, maximum impact. I want every criminal in America to understand what happens when you disrespect Dutch Schultz. The plan was perfect. Al had a routine. Every Tuesday night he reviewed the week's business at the Biograph Theater after the last show. The theater manager, desperate to pay gambling debts, had given Dutch's men complete building access. 12 armed professionals versus one target. No matter how smart or tough Al was, mathematics didn't lie. But Dutch had made one crucial error. He'd assumed Al Capone was just another crime boss who relied on reputation and violence. He didn't understand that Al treated every potential threat like a chess match, thinking 5 moves ahead of his enemies. March 8, 1931, 11:30 p.m., the Biograph Theater's last showing ended. Customers filed out into the cold Chicago night. Al's bodyguards swept the building, found nothing suspicious, then left as instructed. Al's wanted privacy for his weekly business review, always conducted alone in the theater's main auditorium. 12:15 a.m., Al walked through the theater lobby, past the empty concession stand, through the heavy doors into the auditorium. 300 seats, all empty except for shadows that moved slightly when they shouldn't have moved. Al sat in his usual seat, 5th row center, opened his ledger, and began reviewing numbers under the dim house lights. He looked completely relaxed, vulnerable, an easy target for professional killers positioned throughout the theater. "Good evening, gentlemen," Al said without looking up from his paperwork. "Dutch Schultz sends his regards, I assume?" Salvatore Romano stepped from behind the screen, Thompson submachine gun trained on Al's head. Nothing personal, Capone. Just business. I appreciate professionalism, Al replied, still not looking up. I hope you'll extend the same courtesy to what happens next. That's when Romano noticed something that made his blood freeze. Al Capone wasn't nervous, wasn't sweating, wasn't even looking at the guns pointed at him. He was checking his watch. You're early, Al said calmly. I told you midnight, you arrived at 1:15. In my business, timing is everything. Eddie Murphy emerged from the balcony, rifle aimed at Al's chest. What are you talking about? Al finally looked up, that trademark calm smile spreading across his face. I'm talking about the fact that you gentlemen aren't here to kill me. You're here to die. The theater's main lights suddenly blazed on, revealing Al's trap. 20 of his soldiers emerged from concealed positions behind seats in the walls from beneath the stage. Each man armed, each position chosen for maximum crossfire coverage. You see, Al said, standing slowly, hands empty. Dutch made the same mistake every amateur makes. He planned your attack. I planned your funeral. Romano's finger tightened on his trigger. Doesn't matter how many men you have, you're still dead. Maybe? Al agreed. But you definitely are, because every man in this theater knows something you don't. What's that? Al's smile widened. Dutch Schultz didn't send you here to kill Al Capone. He sent you here to test me, and gentlemen, you're about to help me pass that test. What happened next would become legend in criminal circles for decades. Al hadn't just prepared an ambush. He'd choreographed a demonstration. His soldiers didn't open fire immediately. Instead, they waited for Al's signal, creating a psychological pressure that broke weaker men before the shooting started. Vincent Torres tried to reach for his wire, muscle memory from dozens of kills. Al's nod was barely perceptible. Torres dropped, 3 bullets finding their mark before his hand touched his weapon. Romano fired wild, panic overriding training. His shot went high, embedding in the theater's ornate ceiling. The return fire was surgical, precise, professional. Romano lived long enough to understand he'd been outplayed before understanding ended. Eddie Murphy had the best position, the clearest shots, the most experience. He managed to wound one of Al's soldiers before crossfire from 4 different angles ended his career permanently. The violence lasted exactly 93 seconds. When silence returned to the Biograph Theater, 11 bodies lay scattered among the seats. Only 1 man remained alive. Frankie Numbers O'Brien, Dutch's newest recruit, hyperventilating behind the last row. Al walked slowly through the carnage, checking each body, ensuring his message would be delivered correctly. He found O'Brien trying to crawl toward the exit, stopped him with a gentle hand on his shoulder. Easy, son, Al said, helping O'Brien to his feet. You're going home, but first you're going to do something for me. O'Brien nodded frantically, unable to speak through his terror. Al reached into his jacket, pulled out a silver coin, a 1929 Mercury dime, and placed it in O'Brien's shaking palm. Give this to Dutch. Tell him it's payment for the lesson he just taught me. What lesson? O'Brien whispered. That I'm ready for anything he can send. Tell Dutch Schultz that if he wants to test Al Capone again, he better send better men. These 12 were good. I'll need at least 20 next time to stay entertained. March 9th, 1931, 6:45 a.m., Frankie O'Brien stumbled into Dutch's Bronx headquarters, still covered in blood that wasn't his own. Dutch was drinking coffee, reading morning papers, expecting good news from Chicago. Where are the others? Dutch asked, looking up from his newspaper. Dead, O'Brien whispered. All of them, every single one. Dutch set down his coffee very carefully. What happened? It was a trap. Capone knew we were coming. Had 20 men waiting. It was like he was putting on a show. Dutch stood slowly, understanding dawning in his experienced criminal mind. O'Brien placed the Mercury dime on Dutch's desk with trembling fingers. He said to give you this, payment for the lesson you taught him. Dutch picked up the coin, studied it in the morning light. What lesson? That he's ready for anything you can send. He said if you want to test him again, send better men. Said these 12 were good, but he'll need 20 next time to stay entertained. The room fell silent. Dutch's lieutenants waited for the explosion, for Dutch to unleash hell on Chicago, to send 50 men south with orders to burn the city down. Instead, Dutch laughed, not with humor, but with recognition. Entertained, Dutch repeated. still examining the coin. The bastard was entertained. He walked to his office window, looked south toward Chicago, calculating costs and benefits with the cold mathematics that had built his empire. "Boss," one of his men ventured. "We sending more men?" Dutch shook his head slowly. "You know what it costs to fight someone who thinks 5 steps ahead of you? Someone who turns your attacks into his advantages? Someone who has an entire city protecting him?" He turned back to his assembled crew, holding up the Mercury dime. "It costs everything. And for what? Chicago money? There's easier money." He pocketed the coin. "We're done with Al Capone. Chicago belongs to him. We focus on New York." The decision shocked everyone. Dutch Schultz, who'd gone to war with Lucky Luciano, who'd never backed down from any fight, was backing down. But Dutch understood something his men didn't. Al Capone had done more than win a gunfight. He'd demonstrated a level of strategic thinking that Dutch respected and feared. You don't fight men like that unless you have to. And Dutch didn't have to. Years later, after both men were gone, a former Chicago police detective revealed the truth behind that night. Al Capone had known about Dutch's assassination plan for 2 weeks, not through luck or coincidence, but through an intelligence network that extended into every major crime family on the East Coast. Capone had informants in Dutch's inner circle, the detective admitted. He knew the plan, knew the men, knew the timing. That theater wasn't just an ambush. It was a demonstration. Al was showing every crime boss in America what happened when you challenged him on his territory. Whether that's the complete truth or legend, one thing is certain: after March 8, 1931, no major crime figure ever again attempted to eliminate Al Capone through direct confrontation. His reputation for strategic brilliance became so complete that rivals preferred negotiation to warfare. And that Mercury dime? Al kept track of it through his network. Dutch carried it as a lucky charm for the rest of his life, a reminder of the night he learned that some enemies are too intelligent to defeat and too dangerous to keep fighting. March 8, 1931. 12 men entered a theater, 1 walked out, and organized crime in America was never the same. Al Capone had proven that the deadliest weapon wasn't the gun, it was the mind that planned 5 moves ahead of everyone else's first move. If this story amazed you, hit that subscribe button. We're telling the Al Capone stories that show why he became the most feared and respected criminal in American history, the strategic mind that made him untouchable. Drop a like if you think intelligence beats violence every time, and in the comments, what would you have done if you were Dutch Schultz after receiving that message? More legendary stories coming your way, don't miss them.